So there we have the most powerful researcher in the world within the area of men's health, erasing seemingly the concept of false allegations, which leads to the immiseration and death of more men than we can ever really know. And there he is, just waving it away. That's how backwards we are.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited today because I've got a guest who I've been trying to organise to talk to for a long time. Hello, George.
Hello, nice to meet you, Tina.
Yeah. George is the TinMen. The TinMen. You're not Tin Man. You're TinMen. The TinMen, and he posts. He's a digital creator from the UK, and he posts lots of lovely, interesting stuff about men. And people have been sending it to me for months and months and months. And I've been trying to get hold of you, George, and I'm very happy to have you here.
Hi. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people struggle to place me. Like, what are you? Who are you? What are you doing? What do we call you? No one knows my full name. No one knows what I do. But yeah, I think digital creator is probably the best way of putting it. But ultimately, I'm just trying to fill in some of the gaps in the debate of gender equality, the gaps that men and boys seem to fall down, that are so often left unspoken for. So I'm trying to fill in those gaps a lot like you've been. But yeah, digital creator sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I work in the creative industry, so I work for various brands, some big and small, like some of the biggest brands in the world, around this very thing. I sort of built a career creating content to achieve certain goals for my clients' needs. Yeah. And then I looked at these facts. I looked at like the research by Murray Strauss, who I'm sure you know was the greatest living expert in family violence research. He presented 200 studies that showed categorically that men and women abuse each other at equal rates. Yeah. So I had an analysis of 200 studies. I had it presented by the greatest expert that's ever lived in the field. And I was like, well, this is great. All it needs is someone like me to put these cards down on the table. This is a winning hand. And then I'd put the hand down and it would lose every time. And then I'd have Erin Pitsey come along. Again, like the pioneer of the domestic violence movement, set up the biggest and first, oldest, largest refuge in the world for women. She would say the same. I'd be like, well, here's my second hand, another set of aces, and it would lose. And then for many years, I've been putting down hundreds, if not thousands of studies. The PASC, for example, which is the biggest database on family violence anywhere in the world, 1,700 studies. Again, doesn't get bigger than that. It's the biggest database. It says it's not gendered. I put it down and I lose again. So that's...
Wait, sorry, George. When you say you lose, what happens?
Oh, people don't care. People don't care. You know, someone would be, oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating. Wow. But I would be like, okay, I'm not interested in you being interested. I want you to be annoyed. Like, we're talking about millions and millions of men not being helped, often turning to things like suicide. And this is beyond being interesting. This is outrageous. So I guess when I say I lose, what I expected was some sort of sea change, but it never seemed to arrive. And that's what I consider a lost hand in many ways.
It's the most extraordinary thing. We work so hard to make sure we get everything right. You know, I have wonderful volunteers who work as researchers for me, and we dig and we dig and we check with this, and we've got our statistics right. And often the statistics will be contradicting, or as you find, adding the other side to the story from what the feminists are saying to what the authorities are saying. And I mean, we might as well not bother. I mean, no one ever... What's interesting for me is no one ever queries my statistics. No one ever engages in discussion to that point. And, you know, all the authorities constantly publish misleading statistics or, you know, pictures that leave half the story, whatever. And they get away... I mean, it just does my head in that no one cares. I mean, you must have been really surprised too when this happened.
Yeah, that's the other side of the story. Like, I'm presenting a meta-analysis of hundreds of studies by worlding experts. No one seems to care. And then someone posts a screenshot of a pixelated tweet that claims something different, and everyone's like, "Wow, let's make that one go viral." The second one, and it's frustrating that I'm held. I mean, I appreciate being held to such a high level of scrutiny because it ultimately helps me
Yeah.
But I really wish people would scrutinize others, because there's a lot to be scrutinized, if we're honest. I mean, some of the things the so-called other side says, meaning the feminist gendered narrative of domestic violence, is so deserving of scrutiny and falls apart so easily. There are just a few pokes that I wish it was just an equal level of, scrutiny and criticism and analysis on both sides. But it's not lost on me how high of a standard I'm held to, whereas other people, often in the women's sector, are just accepted at face value. So doubly bewildering.
And I mean, I must say, one thing that's depressed me about getting to know your work, George, is that I always assumed that I'm such an amateur when it comes to social media, and I'm never. People always say, "Oh, you just have to use social media, and you have to do more posts." And here you are, obviously a real expert in creating the messages, with the information, and a very. I showed one of them in my blog a few weeks ago. The sort of work you do. Really professional, arresting, interesting images.
Thank you.
Exactly what we're told to do. Yeah, and it still doesn't make any difference. I mean, that's what's extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true, and I'm not sure what to say, but I feel like that's a damning indictment of the problem itself. And the people that do criticize me never have. I'm open to taking criticism. Like I said, I thrive off it, and the reason why the quality is so high is because I do listen to criticism. I remember, but then I got a criticism just yesterday, and it was just literally said something like, "You need to delete your account, otherwise we're going to take legal action. They're going to take legal action against me." I'm like, "Well, what? On what grounds? On what ground?" Like, it's like, show me something I said that's not true. And they're like, "Well, you're presenting a misleading narrative." Okay, well, give me an example of that though. Just show me a post that I've said, this is X, but the reality is it's Y. Just show me something where I'm actually, and they never do. They never do. They just insult you some more. I'm like, okay, you've done that bit. I get it. I'm an incel or whatever else. But just show me what I've done wrong. Show me where I'm being misleading. And they never show you. They just want to insult you. So it's not even like a lot of criticism is even helpful. It's just them venting, and it's just a waste of time.
I know, that's the depressing thing, and it's so hard to actually engage. I mean, have you had any opportunities to reach? I don't know, even harder. I mean, you've been interviewing some significant players in the men's sphere, and particularly Did you talk to? No, you didn't talk to Warren Farrell, did you?
I talked to Warren Farrell. Yeah.
Oh, you talked to Warren and other people like that who are playing in my view, playing a very careful game, saying as much as they feel they can say without insulting the feminists, without ever naming the enemy, without doing all the things I do. And
well, I mean, go on.
You go on. Tell me what you think about it.
No, I was going to say, I don't want to stereotype you, but I feel like I have an additional level of stigma because I'm a man. And at least you have a small benefit of being a woman in this space. Like the women I know in this space, they're given a bit more slack. They can say a little bit more than I can. But I mean, I understand you've experienced huge amounts of backlash yourself, Tina. So obviously that's not enough.
Yeah. Tell me about the sort of issue which seems to have really resonated. If you talk about what's working and what's not, where do you feel you've made something?
Nothing really resonating in the way I want it to resonate. I mean, people are talking more about male suicide, but they're never in the way in which I would like them to talk about it. People talking about it, but in a quite superficial level that only has a limited amount of utility, in my opinion. But we're slowly moving up the ladder. Men's health is becoming a more acceptable centre of conversation, but still nowhere near where it needs to be. We're slowly moving up that level of sort of spicy conversation, but I know people are still not ready to talk about it. I remember going to a private party. There was a time where I spent a small moment of my life as somebody, and I would get invited to like private parties, and I got invited to one private party in Soho, which is the fashionable part of London, at the Groucho Club. Anyway, I was at the private party, and I was talking to someone called Emily Mattis. Emily Mattis, for those who don't know, is probably the most influential journalist in the whole country. Like at least top 5. Like she is the one. If there's anyone's going to get cheered, if I could go for a phone book, She has the contacts that I need. She can exact the change I'm asking for. So I ended up talking to her, and I was like, this is it. This is it. I got a chance now. Someone said to her, this is Emily. Tell her something about men and boys. And I was just like, this is my chance. So I went through my little Rolodex in my brain about something I could tell her that would be just relevant, UK-based, something that can't be offensive. And I went with sentencing bias. So sentencing bias is basically a man and a woman going to court, having committed the same crime, the same criminal record. The man's more likely to be sentenced, and he's more likely to be sentenced to a longer time in prison for the exact same crime. So sentencing bias. And I said to Emily, I was like, Emily, did you know that a man and a woman going into court in the UK with the same criminal record, that he has an 88% higher chance of going to prison than she does? And I was like, and then her face is just blank, like so blank, so disinterested. And I was like, a man and a woman, same crime, same criminal record, he's more likely to go to prison, not a significantly 88% more blank face. And I just, if I said black men and white men, which is true, black men are more likely than white men, she would be outraged. But she said nothing about being about men versus women. So that was when I was just realizing there's something more going on here. There's like a level of denialism and just ignorance that is self-inflicted. And there's, I don't know what to do about that, to be honest.
Yeah. And I mean, they're the people who are choosing not to listen, not wanting to know. But then there's, I think, a large group who are on our side, but who will always say, oh, you're really brave doing this. But I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't even dare talk to my friends about this. I mean, I actually think that's the majority of people, because I'm still out there, and I have a sort of legacy audience from my early days, older people who do come and talk to me about all these things, and they'll all, I know ordinary men and women are on side, but they are too frightened to say anything, and that's scary. I mean, what is this? You know, are we living in a Stalinist era? I mean, it is. when you're in the middle of it, it is quite scary to realise how effectively they've silenced all men's issues. All the controversial ones. Yeah,
that's what power is. I mean, everyone talks about the patriarchy, and we can't do what we want. We're being controlled and oppressed by the patriarchy. But in the terms of what you said, I know so many people that care deeply about these issues. 80% of my following, I asked, are you afraid to share my content? 80% said yes. So this is 4 and 5 people agreeing with what I'm saying, but just scared to share it because they're afraid, understandably so. I don't share my own content. I don't even follow my own page. So I consider myself part of that. And I'm like, that is power. Yeah. Like, if you're afraid to tell people what you believe, who you are, that is power. That is, in many ways, to be oppressed, because you're having a voice taken away from you. And I'm like, well, think about who in your head, who's sending you that angry DM, castigating you, and it's not a bloody white man CEO. It's probably a woman that's just in your that destroying your reputation. And I have loads of people, both male and female, doing that to me, and that is power. Yeah. That is serious power. That's dangerous, and I don't think it's unreasonable for people to be afraid, because people lose their jobs over this. People will lose their friends and family. They get bullied, and it's just horrendous. Like, it's a real thing, and it's worthy of being afraid, I think. But it's changing, slowly changing, I think.
Oh, no question in my mind. It's worth being afraid. It's worth taking the risk. Well, obviously, I've got nothing else to lose. I think you probably do, George. At a certain point in your career, which makes it tougher. I mean, you're youngish, young male. How old are you, George?
Mid-30s.
When did you say?
36. Well, no, I mean,
a long career ahead of you, which is presumably why you don't use the surname. Yeah.
No, well, my career in the creative industry is behind me now. I think, like, I've neglected it for enough years now, doing this work that is sort of dead either way. I'm sure there's people that would benefit from destroying my career, and they're welcome to do that, because I'm almost at the point now where I can sustain myself through this work. And inside these 4 walls I'm sat in, I've got everything I need. I've got my dogs, my girlfriend, and they all love me. And what else do you need in life? I don't care if you hate me. We want to say nasty things about me. Go right ahead. I've got everything I want, and I've got the admiration of those who I want it from. So I'll take that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. Now let's talk about why it's worth it. And I thought we might talk about Movember, because you've been doing some wonderful work exposing some of the key issues with this huge health organisation. I think we both argue is going off the track. Now tell me about your views on Movember.
My views on Movember, I think people struggle to understand that Movember is an actual organisation. People know Movember primarily as the meme, like Movember. You grow a moustache on November, that's it, you raise money. But beyond that, it is actually an enormous NGO, a huge men's health charity, the biggest of its kind anywhere in the world. It's huge. I can't overemphasize how big it is. It's not just a meme. And yeah, I think they've been capitalizing on the enormous success of that meme, that shareability of the moustache. It's incredible. So as a professional, 10 out of 10 for me. Amazing work marketing that. Got the brand value of that is incredible. Paid for itself 10 times over. But behind that is a charity that I agree started off well, but has increasingly gone off the rails over maybe the past 5 or so years, maybe longer. And now they're expanding. So obviously they're an Australian charity, but they're now all over the world. They're in Europe, the UK, Canada, America, most of all. And I've been certainly critical of the UK arm for many reasons. Three, most of all. Firstly, is that they're not supporting the Violence Against Men and Boys bill. So in the UK, there was no dedicated strategy for protecting male victims of abuse. Now there's a bill called the Violence Against Men and Boys Act, which will change that. So that will start to protect men who are being abused and otherwise. Movember are not supporting that bill, despite me asking them several times, both in private and in public. There's no interest from them. They do not consider partner violence, for example, to be a men's health issue, which is outrageous. Of course it is. That's the first issue. The second issue is the amount of money they have. I mentioned it. They have about £54 million in the bank in the UK. Similar amount in Australia, but in the UK, they're not spending this money. Their money's coming in from the donors, and it's not getting spent. It's going up and up and up and up and up, like a big mountain of cash, and that's a problem. Like if you're a charity, that money has to be going out. The whole point of you getting that money is not to hold on to it; it's to spend it on men. Like that, people donate money for men. And the third criticism I've leveled at them is that a complete lack of appropriate governance. So, like all charities, we have trustees at the top. A trustee is there to ensure the money is properly spent on the country it's in, but none of Movember UK's trustees are British or even living in Europe. They're all Australian or American. So it's like we've got 9 trustees of this enormous men's health charity in the UK. All of the trustees are based abroad, not even on the continent, not in the UK, not on literally the other side of the planet. That's a problem too. None of this is illegal, of course, but it's certainly, in my view, unethical and unacceptable. And that every time I tell people about this, they're shocked. They're like, I can't believe how much money they've got. I can't believe the trustees are not British. I can't believe they're not supporting the men. It's not about me being wrong. It's about people not knowing the truth. And the more people that know the truth, the more people are outraged. So that's my job, just to raise that up the flagpole and hopefully get some change. Hopefully spend the money, change your trustees, support the bill. Simple as that.
Yeah. The other thing you said to me, George, was the fact that the worry is that they are, sucking up all the money that might have gone to men's health. I mean, people think, oh, aren't I good? I'm growing a mow, and, oh, I'm supporting my boyfriend who's doing, and this is their bit for the year. This is what they do for men's health. And all these tiny little organisations where people have slaved to try to provide a bed for a man trying to escape a violent wife and with his children or whatever it is. Or more health-related issues as well. I mean, every organisation, just about, every other organisation in this country and in the UK trying to help men is really struggling, and most of them are going downhill. And that's partly because all the money is being sucked up by this huge organisation. It makes me hopping mad.
Yeah, me too. you can't help but laugh in many ways. Like if you paint in the context, it gets even worse. And you have, it's not just about them hoarding cash. It's the fact that contextually around that is a men's sector that is just deeply, deeply impoverished in real financial dire straits. Like I know charities that have, forget about 50 million or even 1 million, they have a few £1,000s in the bank, like which they'll in a few weeks is going to be gone and they're going to go bankrupt. I know people that are doing dog sitting to fund their research. I know men's groups in Wales, like working men's groups that are closing down all over the country. I know the only support line for male survivors of sexual abuse that's about to close down because they've got no money. I think it costs £250,000 to fund that line. It's the only line supporting male victims of sexual abuse in the UK. So £250,000, you could fund that for hundreds of years from Movember, and they would still have millions of pounds. So it's not that they're hoarding cash; it's that they're hoarding cash for it. Like they've got nothing. There is nothing. Like
Sorry,
I mean,
George,
I need money every month. That's fine because I can weather the storm.
George, I think we lost you halfway through.
Yeah.
Can you do that again?
Okay. I'll rewind. Yeah, it's not. It's about adding the context in about. It's about adding the context in about how deeply impoverished and desperate for money so many charities, organisations, like I said, doing incredible work long before Movember arrived. We're talking decades, and they've got nothing. They have like not millions or tens of millions or even tens of thousands. They have a few £1,000 in the bank, and they're going to be wiped out in a matter of weeks. And they desperately need cash. We've just closed down working clubs all over men. They're shutting because of lack of money. We're closing down the only support line for male victims of sexual abuse. That's about to close down. That costs about £250,000 a year. They're not getting the funding anymore. They're going to close. So there's nowhere for men to go. I mean, Movember could support that line single-handedly for hundreds of years and still have millions of pounds left to go. So it's the amount of money they have is unethical and irresponsible. And I think if people knew how much they had and how little everyone else had, people would give the money rightly to the local charities that are here first and are doing the real brave work that Movember others don't seem to be interested in.
Yeah. I've just putting together a blog about what's happening with Movember in Australia. I mean, I do feel there's a real issue that Movember is run by a self-proclaimed feminist and is signed up to all sorts of UN women's rubbish about gender equality. That's not what this organisation's supposed to be all about. And they've taken over some of the funding for suicide prevention in Australia, and they're doing things like, they're funding a program which is about helping people who've already attempted suicide. And it turns out, of course, that women tend to attempt suicide and not succeed more often than men do. Men are more likely to be successful when they try, and therefore this particular program has 60% female recipients of their services. Well, I mean, this is supposed to be a men's health program. They're also busily training the professionals in this field, the mental health nurses, the psychologists, so on, who are almost all women, and they're training them to talk to men. And of course, that training, in my view, includes a lot of indoctrination of, blaming men for their deficiencies, the fact that they don't cry enough, and they don't reach out, and they don't do all the things, I would argue, the feminist things that would help, make them suitable recipients so it goes on. Go on, George.
I know, I agree. I mean, I've seen that before. I've seen like the fancy sort of campaigns that Movember do and the expensive conferences they run about deprogramming masculinity. And I think about the man that's most at risk of suicide in the UK, which is a middle-aged construction worker living in a northern rural town. And I imagine him watching these campaigns, and I'm like, it's so irrelevant to him. Like, this is just, a lot of it's just virtue signaling, and I don't think it's that effective. I think so often the subject of male suicide is gatekept by feminists, by feminist voices, feminist academia, and that's not right. Like as a man, I've learned to listen to women when they talk about women's issues, but there's a seat right next to me for women and feminists to sit down on and listen to men's lived experiences when it comes to men's mental health and male suicide. And so often the very last person we talk to about male suicide are actually men, and that's not right. It shouldn't be glossy corporate charities like Movember doing these often just performative acts of advocacy. It should be real on the grounds where those most at risk, and it often isn't. It's just I think about men.
No, sorry, George. I was just going to say that they won't even acknowledge that it's a reaction to a situational distress. I mean, we know that it's not a mental health problem. The suicide in Australia, we have coroner's report evidence published on our major statistical body, the Bureau of Statistics, which shows that the person most at risk is, guys 25 to 45 with relationship breakup. This is what, and we know what's going on in our courts. The false allegations, the parental alienation, men losing their children, men ending up selling, living in their cars to try to pay lawyers' bills to try to see their kids. I mean, it's just outrageous. And that never gets discussed by November. And they won't, it's very deliberate avoiding this. And it's being avoided by all our suicide prevention bodies. And we have a unbelievably anti-male government at the moment, this Labor government, who,
it's crazy in Australia.
We just had this budget exercise where they were preparing a budget, and they got all the big men's organisations to prepare, strategies for what they do for men's health, and they brought them all together to announce the results of their deliberations, and they gave hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding for women and zero to men. Zero. I mean, it's just outrageous, Anyway, so it goes on. What about your Labor government? How are they? Do you feel they're any better or worse than previous governments when it comes to men?
It's too early to tell. There's been some success. I mean, I supported ballot last election, so I didn't vote for anyone. I would normally vote for Labour, but not this time. But they've announced there's been some wins. There's been the men's health strategy, which I mentioned, which was announced. Sort of, it was on the cards already, but it's now actually become an official thing, which is essentially a great piece of policy, not yet fully formed, but has been announced. And it's essentially, as it describes, a men's health strategy to mirror the women's health strategy to help, help men in many of the ways in which they've fallen behind, most of all, perhaps suicide. That's been a success. Movember obviously giving themselves a big pat on the back for that one, but they did help get it over the line. But they only joined that campaign a few years ago. For 10 years before that, they didn't want anything to do with it. So when the small charities who I talked about were there beating the drum for years, decades, Movember did nothing. And then when they get to the final straight and they can see the finish line in sight, that's when Movember join the race. They take the baton, they carry it over the line, they give themselves a big old pat on the back, and they take all the photo opportunities. And I'm like, okay, you did the easy bit. The hard bit was 10 years ago when people get no help and you did nothing. So remind yourself that you're a guest to the party and you're late. So settle down. But overall, it has been a success. And I'm excited to see what that strategy looks like. Like I said, there's now a bill to support male victims of abuse. The Labour Party are not supporting that. The government have done absolutely nothing to support that. That's come from the Conservatives, so the right. Okay. So, and it's not lost on me whenever I see that in Parliament twice now. There's almost no Labour MPs there whatsoever. Certainly not the government. Definitely not Jess Phillips. So, yeah, more blood on the hands of Labour, I would say, but less blood than normal. So slow progress, and there's more to come that I can't share with you just yet. But things are changing, but not fast enough.
Yeah.
But there was a policy that pissed me off. There's one policy that did annoy me, and that's that. One of the things I talk about a lot is men in prison, incarceration of men, how damaging it is. Like everything, suicide, mental health, addiction, homelessness, it ruins people's lives. It seals them into a life of crime. A lot of the men I don't think should even be there for a lot because they've not committed violent crimes. Anyway, we've just appointed a new Minister of Prisons called James Timpson, who's a wonderful guy, I thought. And he's built a whole company in the UK hiring men from prison. He's hired thousands of men, giving them new jobs, He's made millions of pounds, like thousands of men. Only maybe less than 5 have reoffended. It's been an enormous success. He got made Minister of Prisons, and I was like, what a great appointment. And he's announced a campaign not long ago to do the same, but only for women in prison. So he wants to close down women's prisons. He wants to change the way the prison system runs, but for women. So he's excluding 96% of the population from that, meaning men. So that doesn't make sense. I don't know why you wouldn't include men in that. It's so stupid. And he's like, well,
yeah.
And it's like, he will say that, well, there's a lot of mums in prison and they need to be with their families. I'm like, okay, but there's even more dads. There's more dads as a percentage and in absolute numbers, and you're doing nothing for them. So it's but it's far from perfect.
The other issue I noticed you writing about or posting about recently, which is dear to my heart, is educational disadvantage of boys, and you're making the point that the gap between males and females is precisely where it was 50 years ago, but it's the other way around. Tell us about that, George.
Well, worse. Yeah. If it were a pendulum, and the pendulum starts in 1973, where Title IX was signed in America to bring women into education, understandable, the pendulum has now swung the opposite way and now further. So it's actually now worse than it was, but it's just the other way around. So I think women were about 12 or 13 percentage points behind in America in the early 70s. They signed that Title IX. 10 or so years later, 1983, equality achieved. So we're done here. But they carried on going. Their foot stayed on the gas, and the pendulum has swung to the point where we're about 18 percentage points, so 12 versus 18, this time disadvantaging men. And no one does anything. It's like, well, there's no change, there's no reform to the law, there's no affirmative action. And in fact, like 90% of sex-based scholarships in America still go to women. And there's no corrective action whatsoever. So the problem hasn't been solved. It's now worse. It's just sexism of the kind that we seem to like, which is the one that harms men and boys. And it's not just higher education, it's every stage of education. Right across the West, boys are disadvantaged and fall further and further behind. But the higher education is just the best cumulative way of looking at that disadvantage. But it's completely prevalent and universal. And as you know, no one talks about that. And I don't understand.
I know. And the most extraordinary thing, we had an announcement recently that Sydney University is doing more women-only jobs for members of the engineering faculty, right? Because that's about the only department in the whole place that isn't totally dominated by women. And so they have to cram more women in there. I always tell the story when it comes to school results of 20 years ago. I wrote a lot about boys' education, and I had managed to get an interview with a very high up bureaucrat. And I said to her, what will happen if boys keep falling behind? Because the gap was really emerging then. And she said, we'll wait 2,000 years and analyse the results very, very carefully. Which was, and it was, joke. And here it is 20 years later. And that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, it's just, and this week we've had our national test results released, and they actually don't even publish gender anymore because it's too embarrassing. There's something very, we're talking Stasi-land stuff here. When they stop publishing the results because someone might notice how ridiculous it's looking.
We're the same here. I don't think we measure gender like that. But the interesting thing about tests, and by that I mean exams, is that in the UK and America, boys aren't behind in exams. They do equally well as girls in exams, but it's specifically in teacher assessments and coursework where they're marked down. Yeah. So it's like boy and a girl comes out of an exam, which is a raw test of intelligence, and they'll do the same, more or less. And then they'll go into a classroom and be assessed by a teacher, and the boy is way down. So it's when you look at objective measurements, they do just as well, but it's when you look at the subjective area of teacher assessments, which brings in the concept of teacher grading bias, a bit like what I talked about, sentencing bias. Men sentence more harshly for the same crime, boys marked down at the same intelligence. So there's questions to be asked about systemic bias. Is that a thing, and does it harm boys? I think it probably does, but no one has the guts to ask those questions besides yourself and me and a few others. And that goes some way to answering the question of why boys are so far behind and at every level. And it makes total sense, in my opinion. The interesting thing about engineering is that we see the same in STEM. Everyone talks about STEM and how far women and girls are behind in STEM. But if you actually look at what STEM means, it's such a bogus term. Like STEM, science, engineering, technology, maths. But if you actually look at the subjects, things like biology aren't included in there. So biology isn't considered a science and a STEM. Neither is like veterinary science, neither is medicine, neither is psychology, neither is nursing, neither is like any of it, toxicology, all these things. And the reason is because there's where women are. So women do work in STEM. They work in the biological life sciences, but those are taken out of STEM. So biology is not a science. And then suddenly you basically cook the books. You basically looked at the areas where men are ahead: physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics, and you've made that STEM. You've taken out the biological and life sciences and psychology and stuff like that. And now suddenly you worked out the calculation in a way that you've designed it. And now they're like, oh, there we go. And it's like, well, you designed it that way. So STEM itself is a bogus term. It's a bit like violence against women and girls. So you've created a definition that excludes men, and then you're shocked that so many women are inside of it, or so few in case of STEM. So it's a very dishonest catchphrase.
But it is amazing, isn't it? I mean, I'm constantly in awe of their brilliance. I mean, the feminists work so hard to have something to complain about, and they're having to work harder and harder and harder because, in fact, things are more and more equitable, and therefore, to find a grievance is not easy. But they manage to dig it up by constantly redefining things.
No, yeah. Well, it's incredibly smart. Again, as a creative strategist myself, there's certain things that I would never have dreamt of doing, which have been extremely effective. Like if you take a group of policies that are fundamentally flawed and exclusionary and harmful, but then you call that violence against women, no one's going to criticize that. Because the sentiment of violence against women, everyone hates. No one, just because I criticize violence against women doesn't mean I approve of it. I'm talking specifically about the policies and frameworks that harm men and women that go by that name. So they're very clever. It's like, you can't criticize violence against women, the policy, because the sentiment that goes by the same name is so worthy and noble. And that's brilliant. That's so clever. The same with feminism. It's like, well, feminism describes a political movement that is worthy of criticism. But because it also is a synonym for just equality, you can't criticize it because people are like, well, you do not believe in equality? I was like, no, I love equality. I just have a lot of issues with feminism. So it's, great, amazing strategy, great use of language there. Very clever. And you're basically just using morality to shield your shit ideas. Like the ideas of violence against women are often flawed, but you can't criticize them because of the naming. It's genius, to be honest.
Do you have trouble thinking of what else you're going to post about, or do you have an abundance of ideas?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, not short of ideas because so few people are talking about them that I have ample choice. It's like the garden of forbidden fruit that no one wants to eat from, that it's all left and I'm there gobbling it all down like a naughty child. So, I have a back catalogue of dozens of posts that I can't wait to get out. I'm not short of ideas. I mean, I have about literally 24 posts I'm working on right now, and they're all really, really important. And it's not because I'm a creative genius. It's just because I'm in a space that no one else wants to talk about. So it's great. Yeah. It's great for me as a content creator. So it's not all bad. It's also actually great. There's a huge gap in the market, and I wish there were more people in the garden of fruit gobbling down some of the delicious items.
Do you think, no, I shouldn't do that? Do you ever hold back thinking that's too dangerous?
Some issues I'm definitely more cautious over. I mean, I guess the most contentious issues are false allegations, because there's just so much grey area and so much uncertainty, and it's so controversial for obvious reasons. I'm not scared, but I'm certainly a lot more careful in some areas than others. But overall, no. I mean, sometimes data comes out and I'm like, oh my God, that's like sometimes the National Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey comes up from America, and sometimes there are more male victims of abuse than female. And I look at that and I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do with that? But I still share it. But sometimes the stats are just like, how am I going to tell people there are more male victims of intimate partner violence in America this year than last year? Like, it's just, so yeah, it's a challenge. You've got to present it in a way that is unapologetic and honest without being antagonistic and overly sort of aggressive. It's just like, it's an interesting way to, how do I present this data? I don't want to piss people off. I don't want to cause outrage unduly, but at the same time, I don't want to, whisper this, oh, hang on, there's more male victims. So it's a creative problem to be solved. But no, there are some areas I'm more cautious of, but none I've been so cautious that I've said nothing about it, I think.
And what has surprised you? Has there been anything where you felt you got it slightly wrong, you got the tone wrong, you probably shouldn't have gone there, or?
Some people have accused me of being too anti-feminist, which, yeah, I can accept. I think that's, I mean, some people say I use too much American data, which I agree. I do use a lot of American data because they're the only ones that are getting the data. Some people say I need to do more to hold to account the misogynists in my comments, and I don't see an abundance of misogyny in my comments. And when I do see that sort of stuff, I am pretty good at like saying something. But overall, a lot of the criticisms I have are just insults. Like, it would be just literal insults about me as a person. It's like, well, I can't do much about that. I'm not an incel. I'm not a misogynist. I don't live in my parents' basement. I'm rather successful and I'm in a happy relationship. And thanks very much for taking a concern. But there is certainly, I mean, there's no single massive lesson I've learned. I'm constantly updating my language and my style. There are certain things, I know when I've talked about body positivity, I think a lot of men don't want to talk about body positivity in the same way that women do. Like, if I were to show a photo of an unhealthy or overweight man and try to normalize that, a lot of men are like, we don't want to normalize that. We want to encourage men to be better. We want to go to the gym. We want to work out. We want to go on. So I appreciate there's a slight difference in certain areas, and I've agreed to that criticism, but no massive expose of how I've been deeply wrong about something. Maybe I rounded something up instead of down, or like vice versa, but nothing massive that I'm aware of. But I'm open to any feedback. If anyone thinks they've got me on something, then by all means, let me know.
Well, look, George, anyway, it's been great to talk to you. I hope I'll continue to share things with you. We have my Aunt Army. I have an Aunt Army Twitter file, X file, which is pretty amateur hour because I'm not very good at posting these things. But we're learning. And I suppose the difference is where I come from, of course, is I have this privileged position in that I'm the person that so many suffering males reach out to, and their mothers and their families, so I'm right in the middle of it all, dealing with what's happening on the ground, and it puts me in an extraordinary position of knowledge. I mean, when you were talking about false allegations, and that, the whole question of whether that's too hard, well, that's my bread and butter. I mean, that's what I hear about every day. Yeah. People who've lost everything through false allegations, and the people who are fighting through the courts and so on. And so, I'm telling their stories, and I'm working with their, the knowledge they give me. And that's, that's something very few other people have. I'm on very solid ground because I know it's happening and I can talk about it. And it's much harder if you're just trying to post information from the data that's out there, because that's so carefully censored and selected to fit in with a certain narrative.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I get similar messages as you do. A lot of men desperately having their lives ruined. I know people like mothers whose sons have ended their lives as a result of false accusations and the treatment that came after that. And yeah, it breaks my heart on a daily basis. I hear it all the time, and yet I'll hear people talk about false allegations, and they'll say, "Well, being falsely accused is like being hit by lightning. It's so rare." And I'm like, I have someone getting hit by lightning in my DMs every day. Like there's a lot of people
Yeah.
getting struck by lightning out there if that's the case, because it's not the case. It's way more common than anyone likes to admit. It happens all the time because the incentives are there. And I think anyone that's going to family court potentially can lose a child, male or female, although it's often obviously women that make these allegations. I can understand why you would make an allegation. If it means you're going to get your child, the incentive is there. And you don't have to necessarily back it up with much evidence. You can make the accusation and then you will often win the case. So it makes sense for it to happen. So the question is, how do we take away those incentives?
Yeah, well, you have to talk about it, George. I think it's one of the it's one of the most important topics of all. I was just quoting today, writing my blog about Movember, and I'm quoting Zach Seidler, who's a psychologist who's risen to the very top ranks of, as you know, of Movember. And he was writing for the, our ABC, the public broadcaster, saying, don't worry about, people come to me saying they're concerned about their sons being falsely accused. It hardly ever happens, falsely. But he absolutely dismissive. Man, if your son behaves himself, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it makes me tear my hair out. But
such bullshit.
They're the people running this organisation, Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with Zach, and I don't know if he's my biggest fan. But there's some work he does that's useful and some work that he does is very unuseful. And I would love to read that interview because that is just shit. That is such bullshit. Like I know people who have lost men in their lives to this very thing that he is trying to. So there we have the most powerful researcher in the world within the area of men's health, erasing seemingly the concept of false allegations, which leads to the immiseration and death of more men than we can ever really know. And there he is, just waving it away. That's how backwards we are. The man that should be shining a spotlight onto this is the one that's tilting it away. So, how invalidating must that be for the men who are probably listening to this, who have been falsely accused, and who have lost others as a result of false accusations? To have to hear that is just really summarizes how backwards some of us are. And I would love to read it into, to be honest.
He's the man who's determining how Movember spends their money on male suicide. And there's this big black hole in the middle. Yeah.
I've heard people describe him as, it's too much power. I've heard people describe him as the most powerful man in men's health research in the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there shouldn't be powerful researchers. Researchers shouldn't have power. They should just have ideas, and that's it. And for him to be able to dictate where that money or research is going, that is just not a system. That's not a scientific system whatsoever. Science is about the best ideas, not the ones with the most power. So, and I would say what he said about false allegations, that is not a good idea. That is not an idea substantiated by evidence. And the amount of snake oil in the area of false allegations is outrageous. And it's so hypocritical, because people will say, well, only 0.0% of allegations end in a false allegation and in a conviction of false allegations. But you've got to consider only a tiny percentage of false allegations ever go to court, and even smaller percentage ever get found guilty. So for you to point at conviction data as a way of comparing it to a lightning strike event is so outrageous and so stupid. And these people know it's stupid, because they'll say rape allegation. If you look at rape data in the criminal court, that isn't a good barometer either. So they know it, but they still push it. So it's not good enough that they don't know what they're talking about. They do know what they're talking about, and they're intentionally trying to mislead people. And false allegations is one of the areas that is seriously misunderstood, and we need to do a lot better, because it is literally ending lives. Like I know the people who lost sons and brothers and fathers as a result of this. And it happens a lot, I'm sure, as you well know better than anyone, Tina. And I'd love to read the interview, so please send it to me.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. All right, George. Well, I think on that cheerful note, we'll move on. And I mean, look, it's been great having you here, and I know a lot of your loyal fans who also follow me will be delighted to actually see you in person. Yeah.
Hi.
And we'll keep in touch. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
I mean, there is
much.
a cheerful message, though. It is getting better.
Yeah.
So, stick with us.
Stick with us. Yeah. And, truth. This is telling truth to power, isn't it? If
I know that it's obviously a dire end to the podcast, but let me just paint a picture that's a
Yeah.
little bit more positive. It
All
is
right.
changing.
Okay.
It is growing. So don't just give us a bit more time, and in the next 5 years it'll be a lot different. But yeah, till then,
Hooray.
see you later.
Good. Okay. Thanks,
Bye.
George. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.